A tax freight train is bearing down on your retirement. To protect yourself, you'll have to harness the power of zero.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Power of Zero show. I am your host, David McKnight. I am the best-selling author of The Power of Zero, Look Before You LURP, The Volatility Shield, and recently released Tax-Free Income for Life. If you have not had a chance to purchase Tax-Free Income for Life, you can do pretty much anywhere fine books are sold. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, wherever you buy books, Tax-Free Income for Life is for sale through Penguin Random House. If you are looking for someone to help you navigate all the pitfalls that stand between you and the 0% tax bracket, head on over to davidmcknight.com. We'll hook you up with a member of our elite POZ advisor group and trained, vetted, qualified by me. And if you are an advisor that wants to transition your practice to a Power of Zero practice, you can head over to powerofzero.com. Of course, we'd always love to subscribe on Twitter. It's at McKnight&Co, at McKnight&Co. You can even follow me on Instagram, which is David C. McKnight. David C. McKnight. Okay, today's episode is entitled The ABCs of POZ, and I wanted to air an interview that I did with Bo Henderson, who's a very good financial advisor out of Atlanta. And the reason why I wanted to air this interview is because I think better than any other interview I've done in recent memory, it really encapsulates the basic principles of Power of Zero, why we think tax rates are going up, how you position your assets, what are the pitfalls that stand between you and the 0% tax bracket, why is math so important in determining which strategy you should adopt, why do we do before and after comparison. So this, if you wanted to, for example, share the Power of Zero principle and approach with a friend or a family member, this would be a great episode to share and to listen to. Take a look at the interview, and we'll see you on the flip side.
David, welcome to the Retirement Resource. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate you having me on.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. In the intro you heard, I think something that comes up with a lot of clients, they know that taxes probably are one of the more important things, if not the most important thing to get right. But they rarely do I find them proactively addressing it. And I see them leaving money on the table. And I believe this has become a passion of yours and a mission of yours to get some concepts and teach people why is this so important? What the concept behind, especially the Power of Zero, why is this important? What do people need to know about it?
Well, the historical paradigm, the conventional paradigm says, hey, put money into your 401k or IRA, get a deduction, and then let that money grow tax deferred. And then when you take that money out in retirement, you're going to be in a lower tax bracket. And if that actually is how everything plays out, that's mathematically the right thing to do. The problem is more and more experts and economists and financial analysts are starting to look at the fiscal condition of our country. We're $23 trillion of debt. We have unfunded obligations of upwards of $239 trillion. What does that mean? That means to be able to deliver on all the promises the federal government's made for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the national debt, they'd actually have to have $239 trillion sitting in a bank account today earning treasury rates to be able to deliver on all the things that they promised that they can't afford to pay for. So we're marching into a future in which the very solvency of the federal government is being called into question. And so what that does to this conventional paradigm is it flips it on its ear. Can we really expect tax rates in the future to be lower than they are today, given all of the debt that we're accumulating, all of the deficit spending that we're at $1 trillion deficits by 2030. It's going to be $2 trillion deficits by 2035. It's going to be $3 trillion deficits per year. And the debt is just going to go up, 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 up. Can we really realistically expect tax rates to be lower in the future? And that's really the heart and the premise of my book, The Power of Zero, is that this whole paradigm has been flipped on its ear. We now have to start to plan for higher tax rates in the future. And how do you organize all of your retirement assets so that you can wring every last bit of efficiency out of those retirement dollars, given this new paradigm?
Well, and so you said it. It's not necessarily how much are in these big accounts, these 401ks and IRAs. It really comes down to how much is my family going to get to actually use and spend? And I saw something when I was looking around for our interview today, and there was something fascinating. You said there, on your site, it says 5 years, 11 months, 23 days until taxes go up. So are you saying we might even be in a window right now where taxes just might be on sale?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm saying. If you look at chapter 6 of my book, The Power of Zero, I call it the tax sale of a lifetime. All of these experts have been saying for years and years and years, we need to raise revenue. We need to lower spending. But back in 2017, December 2017, the federal government did just the opposite. They ate the dessert before they ate the spinach. What they did was they basically said, let's lower taxes for everybody, and let's increase the national debt at $1.5 trillion over the next 10 years to pull this off. So we now have this, and by the way, that tax cut, because they couldn't get full majorities in the House and Senate to approve it, it has an expiration date. So it's got a sunset provision, meaning January 1st, 2026, those tax rates are going to go back to exactly what they were in 2017. So we now have 6 years between now and then within which to take advantage of historically low tax rates. And every year that goes by where people fail to take advantage of those historically low tax rates is potentially a year beyond 2026 when they could be forced to pay the highest taxes they're likely to see in their lifetime.
Yeah, so taxes don't seem fun when you have to pay them, but when you look at them in perspective and say, hey, I might have an opportunity right now in a window. And there's another issue I've seen, and I don't know if it's just representative of our client base here in Atlanta. I doubt it, but I'm seeing more and more that idea or concept. I was taught 20 years ago when I came in to this world, that same story about expenses being lower in retirement. I'm seeing more and more of a consumption model that most of the people I have conversations with retiring, we're trying to create pretty much a lateral transition into retirement because they're spending what they make to make life work. So that idea, I've seen it somewhat of a fallacy that, yeah, it's going to drop to 70% or some of the things you've heard in the past.
Yeah. I mean, like Tom Hegna famously said, when do you do your most spending during your working years? It's Saturday. That's when you go to Home Depot. That's when you go to all these other places, spend all this money. He goes, guess what? When you're in retirement, every day is a Saturday. So this notion that you're going to be spending less money in retirement, it's just not true. I mean, you've got two types of expenses that most people don't think about. They're what we call the aspirational expenses, which is, hey, you're going to go on that extra vacation. You're going to take all the grandkids to Disney World. And then you've got the shock expenses. These are healthcare expenses, long-term care expenses. You got to fix the roof. You got to get a new car. All these things that you don't anticipate, these buffer account type of expenses. And all the studies are showing that people are spending much more money in retirement than they ever even dreamed possible.
Right. Now, somebody out there listening, nodding their head saying, yeah, the taxes are the big thing. David, you know something, you have something. Where do we start with this journey? I doubt it's a set it and forget it proposition. It's probably going to take some work over time and some diligent effort. But where do we start? And what's this process of that very intriguing sounding idea of working toward a 0% tax bracket?
Well, there's a couple of different steps that you got to go through. Number one, you've got to recognize that tax rates in the future are going to be higher than they are today. If you don't believe me, read chapter 1 of my book, or you can check out my movie, The Power of Zero, The Tax Train is Coming. What we did is we interviewed all of the experts all across the country that know the most about the national debt as it relates to the future of tax rates. And it's about a 75-minute presentation, a documentary that you can see on iTunes or YouTube or stream from Amazon. And these are really famous people. I mean, former Secretary of State George Shultz, Governor of Utah, David Walker, former Comptroller General of the federal government, Larry Kotlikoff, foremost expert in the country on fiscal gap accounting. And they're all sort of weighing in on what they think is going to happen to tax rates in the future. And they're all agreeing that tax rates, even in the next 10 years, are going to have to be dramatically higher than they are today just to keep us out of bankruptcy. So that's the first step. You got to recognize that tax rates are going to be higher in the future. The second step is to recognize that in a rising tax rate environment, there's an ideal amount of money to have in each of your 3 different types of buckets. We got the taxable bucket. These are your liquid savings. You got your tax-deferred bucket, 401ks, IRAs, 403bs, TSPs, so on and so forth. Then you got your tax-free bucket. These are your Roth IRA, Roth conversion, Roth 401ks, and certain types of properly funded life insurance programs. So in a rising tax rate environment, you should have a minimal amount of money in these first 2 buckets. In your taxable bucket, you should really only have about 6 months worth of basic living expenses. In your tax-deferred bucket, you want balances to be low enough that when you have to start taking required minimum distributions at age 72, that those required minimum distributions are low enough that they get offset by your standard deduction in retirement, but also low enough that they don't cause Social Security taxation. Really, everything above and beyond those ideal amounts should be systematically repositioned to tax-free. You don't do it all at once. You stretch that tax liability out over as many years as is necessary to get all the heavy lifting done, but you want to get it done before tax rates go up for good. So that's really, I got 6 years or less to get all this heavy lifting done, get money shifted to tax-free by way of Roth conversions and things like that.
And I can just imagine people listening to this, and that sounds great, but how is that something that you do or people you train can help exactly get into, hey, out of my $1 million overall portfolio, where do those ratios need to be exactly? Is that planning that can be done with people that are trained in this?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, if you don't have a pension, I can tell you right now, if you don't have any pension or any other residual streams of income coming out of your tax-deferred bucket, you shouldn't really have more than, if you're a married couple, more than about $350,000 in that bucket. So if you've got $1 million, you've really got 6 years to get that bucket skinny down to about $350,000. You want to have everything else safely ensconced in your tax-free bucket by the time January 1st, 2026 rolls around.
Well, let's talk about too, David, what doing this work. And that's what I find is most people, when it comes to planning, they're very passive and very reactive. And this is yearly. Hey, yearly, if I'll be diligent for this period of time I have, it can make a difference. In cases we've modeled hundreds of thousands of dollars of difference in money they get to use and spend. But let's talk a little bit about what's so important. What comes to mind for me is how this strategy impacts provisional income and how it affects things like RMDs. That again, I see people not addressing those things until they're happening to them, and it's too late to really do anything about it.
Yeah, most people don't recognize that your Social Security can be taxed, and they don't even know what the phrase provisional income is. I gave a talk to 100 CPAs a couple of years ago. I said, how many of you guys have heard of the phrase provisional income? Only 2 hands in the room went up, which is scary because what's provisional income? That's the income the IRS keeps track of to determine if they're going to tax your Social Security. I found that if you have too much provisional income, and for married couples, we're talking $44,000 for single people, it's $34,000, and up to 85% of your Social Security can become taxable to you at your highest marginal tax bracket. To put that into perspective for you, I've done studies on this on hundreds of clients over the years. And what I found is on average, when your Social Security gets taxed, you're going to run out of money 5 to 7 years faster than people who do not have their Social Security tax. Why? Because the act of compensating Social Security taxation forces you to spend down all your other assets that much faster. So it's a really, really big deal. Most people don't understand what causes Social Security taxation, but they are spending down all of their other assets to compensate for it. So the whole idea here is that if you can take that $5,000 to $6,000 you would have otherwise given back to the IRS in the form of Social Security taxation, you can keep it inside of your portfolio and growing compounded over the balance of your retirement. Guess what? Your retirement dollars are going to last longer.
Look at that. Yeah, your savings actually, I see that it's stretching. And this just happened last week, David. I had a guy come in. He's very frustrated. He saved well, and he's almost being punished for it. He feels like he is being hit up yearly with a mid 6-figure RMD from a really big 401k, and all he wants to do is leave that to his kids. But right. he feels I'm forced to take it. I'm forced to take it whether the market's down or up. And so I think let's talk about the power, because again, I don't think people realize some of the things that can be forced later. Now, luckily, we have a little bit of an extension for some people to 72, maybe to get some of this planning done. But let's talk about the power of planning for RMDs. And again, not just waiting till they happen to you.
What we're generally asking people to do is something that goes against their most natural impulses. And that's to pay a tax before the IRS absolutely requires it of you. As of right now, as of January 1st, 2020, they're not requiring you to pay tax on that money until age 72. The question is, does that really make sense? And for most people, it makes sense to look at preemptively paying some tax on those dollars on your terms so that you're not having to pay tax on those assets on the IRS's terms at age 72. And if you're age 62 right now, and you're not planning on taking that money till age 72, guess what? That's 10 years from now. And most experts agree that tax rates are going to be dramatically higher than they are today 10 years from now. That's if our country's even still solvent by that point. And not to mention, Bo, what happens if you leave a large amount of money in your IRA or 401k and you want your kids to inherit it? They're going to have to spend that money down within 10 years based on the new Secure Act that got voted into law in December. So what are the implications of that? That means you're going to have to, your kids are going to have to pay tax on those dollars, probably at the apex of their earning years, when tax rates are likely to be much higher than they are today, at a period in time when they can least afford to pay the tax. And now they can no longer do a stretch Roth or stretch IRA. So they're going to be forced to pay taxes on that in 10 years. All of that taxation is going to be squeezed into 10 years. It won't be unusual, Bo, for a lot of Americans who inherit these accounts to pay upwards of 50% on these accounts. I think this is a massive cash grab by the IRS. And unless people are actively taking advantage of today's historically low tax rates to get money shifted to tax-free vehicles, it's going to be a real bloodbath on the back end.
Right. And we'll see it later. That's one of those things that the change today doesn't. We see the doing away with the stretch IRA. Yeah, but we're going to see the impact. I think you're right, down the road, of people literally getting caught having to take this money out in this really concise window. David, one of the things I was, as we were talking about this, you talked about it's against our nature to pay any more tax than we have to in a given year. It makes me think of a lot of the tax professionals, CPAs that I've worked with. A lot of those people, that's their focus too, is how do I minimize tax this year? So it makes me wonder, do you see pushback from some of these people that they're just so focused on this year and they're not looking at the 20, 30-year horizon, even from tax professionals that people might trust?
Yeah, unfortunately, the paradigm that most CPAs work in is if they want to keep you as a client, they got to give you a tax refund. Most people judge their CPA based on whether they got a tax refund or not. So basically, if you have a CPA that comes along and says, hey, keeping my clients happy, is determined by how much I'm saving them in taxes this year, this whole paradigm is going to be sort of repellent to the way they approach things. And so we talk with CPAs, we give them copies of my book. We do it all the time. And we're basically trying to affect a paradigm shift in a whole generation of CPAs. Basically says, hey, look, let's take a look at the handwriting on the wall. Let's take a look at the fiscal condition of our country. Are tax rates 10 years from now really going to be lower than they are today? And if not, why are we continuing to urge 78 million baby boomers to take deductions today at historically low tax rates only to postpone the payment of those taxes till some point much further down the road? It just doesn't make sense given the trajectory of tax rates. So CPAs typically are in the reporting business. At the end of the year, you shove your receipts across the table and he tells you how much you owe. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to affect this paradigm shift that says, let's take a look at what your tax liability would be 5, 7, 10 years from now if you don't change anything today. And are there some strategies we can implement today that are going to put you in a better position to save tax rates or save money on taxes somewhere down the road?
And we can almost flip that, because I was, as we were bringing this discussion up, and I want to include financial advisors in this discussion, this CPA. Are there a question or two or three that you think that would be good for listeners to say, hey, why don't you ask this to your professional to see if they're the right fit for helping you really with this long-term planning versus this very short-term focused, maybe the old model of what we call retirement planning? Any things that you could do to say, hey, why don't you show up next time or interview people and maybe ask this question or two that might give you a good hint if they're thinking long-term best results or they're just very short-term old school thinking?
Well, that's pretty easy to do. They can either read my book or watch my movie, or they can even read an article written by David Walker that he wrote 10 years ago. David Walker was the former Comptroller General of the federal government. Knows more about these numbers than anyone else on the planet. And back in 2011, he wrote a CNN op-ed that said, tax rates are going to have to double. Okay, so if tax rates are going to have to double, one very easy question that you could ask your advisor is, if tax rates are going to double, why do I have 100% on my retirement account in an account where I haven't paid taxes yet? Why am I postponing the payment of these taxes until tax rates double sometime down the road? And so what I tell people all the time is say, look, if your advisor hasn't told you about this, it's for one of two reasons. Either he or she doesn't know about it, or he or she knows about it, but they're not telling you about it. And I don't know, frankly, Bo, which one is worse.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I see that in a lot of areas, whether it's Social Security strategy. A lot of these is that crucial information is left out either because our industry is failing because they're not trained, or unfortunately they're not figuring out a way to be compensated by it, so they just don't bother, and that's a shame. Well, let's think. So that's some good questions. So we're talking about most people get to the table to start doing planning and strategy with 401ks, IRAs. Not good or bad; those are just the vehicles they have to accumulate in a lot of cases over time. But how do we start shifting the mindset? Or I guess the better question, David, is what are some of the tools we're starting to look at as we talk about transitioning and converting to these more favorable tax buckets?
Yeah, I tell people all the time, there isn't any one tool that you're going to use to get to the 0% tax bracket. By the way, why am I such a big fan of the 0% tax bracket? Well, if tax rates double, like a lot of these experts are predicting, then 2 times 0 is still 0. If you're in the 0% tax bracket and tax rates double, 2 times 0 is still 0. So the only way to really insulate yourself from the impact of higher taxes is to get to the 0% tax bracket. And to get to the 0% tax bracket usually requires 4 to 6 different streams of tax-free income, none of which show up on the IRS's radar, but all of which contribute to you being in the 0% tax bracket. Anything with the word Roth in front of it, I'm a huge fan. Could be a traditional Roth IRA, the one where if you're over age 50, you can contribute $7,000 per year. It could be a Roth 401k, where you get that free money from work. We love those. Roth conversions, that's going to be your real big workhorse in getting hundreds of thousands of dollars shifted from tax-deferred to tax-free. I talk about in chapter 5 of my book, the life insurance retirement plan, which is excellent. It's tax-free. The money grows safely and productively. And you get a death benefit that doubles as long-term care. I'll tell you, Bo, this is one huge thing that people overlook is how they're going to pay for long-term care. I mean, right. If you end up in a long-term care facility, the community spouse, the surviving spouse, gets to keep one house, one car, about $128,000 of cash, and a minimum monthly maintenance needs of allowance, which in most states is about $2,500 a month. Everything else gets earmarked for the long-term care facility. What I found is that people aren't opposed to having long-term care insurance, they're just opposed to paying for it. What the LIRP allows you to do is you are paying for a death benefit in that program, but the death benefit doubles as long-term care. So if you die peaceful in your sleep 30 years from now, never having any long-term care, someone's still getting a death benefit. And then you get to use all that tax-free cash value in the meantime to supplement your lifestyle needs tax-free at a period in time when tax rates are likely to be higher than they are today. Also, if through the Roth conversion, we can get the balances in your IRAs and 401ks low enough, you can use your standard deduction to offset the RMDs that are coming out of there, so your RMDs can be tax-free. And guess what? If by using all of these different streams of tax-free income, it can keep you below your provisional income thresholds, then your Social Security can be tax-free as well. If tax rates double by 2030, and there's a lot of experts out there that are predicting that tax rates could have to double by 2030. In fact, That seems to be the general conclusion of the experts in my movie, is that tax rates will have to rise dramatically, if not double by 2030. Tom McClintock, congressman out of Sacramento, he's on the Republican Budget Committee in Congress. He says, look, in 8 years, we're going to be Venezuela. So this is serious, serious stuff. The federal government's not addressing it. They love to wait until the 11th hour to do anything about it. I remember I was Bo, if you remember from the debt, when they were increasing the debt ceiling back in like 2015 or 2016, they convened a committee and they really couldn't figure out what they wanted to do. And I remember watching CNN saying, we will, there's a little sign on the upward left-hand corner of the screen where CNN was saying, we default on our debt in 30 minutes. So that tells us that we love painting ourselves into a corner. We love procrastinating. We love kicking down the can down the road. The problem with this approach is the fix on the back end is going to be all the more draconian. It's going to be all the more severe. It means we're likely going to have to pay much more taxes than we would if they simply put a permanent fix in place today.
Wow. Well, David, that's as we're talking through this, one of the things I'm thinking, I'm always trying to put myself in the listener out there listening to this conversation. And I'm thinking, hey, this sounds good. This sounds like the right thing to do to work on this. We have a window. I love the idea of reducing taxes. I haven't met one person in a room. I'll ask every month when we do different kinds of workshops around Atlanta. I'll ask, hey, who in here doesn't want to reduce taxes as much as possible? I haven't found one person yet that didn't raise their hand, right? I mean, that's as soon as something unique or something different than conventional advice comes along, like we're talking about with the power of zero, there's going to be naysayers or things out there that confront what we're talking about. Are there a few things that you've come up against that are the biggest things that people have that they try to, I guess, confront this strategy with or push back?
Yeah, there's a financial guru out there called the White Coat Investor. And he read my book about 5 years ago. And he said, look, why would you advocate that tax rates in the future are going to be higher than they are today? He goes, we're just going to go back to 70s style inflation and we'll print our way out of it. The problem with that approach, I told him as I responded to his blog post, as I says, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are all tied to inflation. So if you try to print your way out of the problem, that inflation goes up and that increases the cost of these programs commensurately. So it's literally mathematically impossible to print your way out of it. And so we sort of came to a stalemate on that. And finally, just recently, I was following him on Twitter, and he was looking at Joe Biden's tax proposal, which was to raise the top marginal tax rate to 50%. And he goes, if Joe Biden gets elected, he goes, I'm going to convert my entire IRA to Roth IRAs all in 1 year. And I put a little comment on his post that said, glad to see you're coming around. And he blocked me for saying that. But I think that we're starting to run out of critics here. I mean, the more the debt grows, the more the handwriting becomes clear on the wall, the fewer the less opposition we have to this whole paradigm. And I think that it's going to prove to be very prophetic when 2030 rolls around and tax rates have to double or rise dramatically to keep us out of the poorhouse. I think more and more people are going to start to jump on this bandwagon and say, hey, look, the math doesn't lie.
Right.
Tax rates have to go up or we go broke as a country. Therefore, I need to change my entire approach to retirement planning.
Well, and David, I think as a country too, as the consumer, I think we need to do a better job of understanding why we believe things or say things. I can't tell you how many times we've had conversations when somebody comes in and says, well, I don't like that. And I'll ask, okay, well, why? Well, it's my favorite is like my neighbor or coworker said it's bad. Or, talking head, radio personality, or somebody, a blogger or something. But there's nothing deeper than that. And that's what I challenge our listeners to is let's go a little deeper. Let's look at the math. The math will usually show the path, right? I mean, that'll let us know how we can model and compare option A to option B to option C, because I think a lot of people fall short where I just heard it's bad, so I'm not gonna go down that path.
Right. And we're the same with all our clients, that we're not going to make a recommendation unless we can show some mathematical corroboration for everything that we do. And so we always run three projections. Hey, look, if this is what you do, if you never met me and you kept on doing exactly what you're doing, tax rates stay about where they are today. When will your money run out? We can show you the year and the day which your money runs out. Then we'll run a second comparison that says, if you don't change anything about what you're doing and tax rates double, how much sooner will your money run out? And plot spoiler here, it's about 12 to 15 years faster. And a third comparison says, hey, if we can get you at or near the 0% tax bracket, get your Social Security tax-free, how much longer will your money last? And guess what? If your money lasts 5 to 7 years longer, there's really no downside to that. 5 to 7 years longer than the scenario then where you just keep on doing what you're doing and you pay tax on your Social Security. So there's really no downside to doing this. I mean, tax rates have to go down in the future for this to really not make sense. And I don't think there's anybody out there that thinks that's going to happen.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think the focus, and again, I'm thinking of the listener today. I think we need to shift the focus to taxes. I think, again, I talk about all the ways. It's funny, being in this industry, I'm constantly talking about the ways our industry has failed the consumer. Is that focus on investments. They're so much sexier and they're funner to talk about and they're easier to market. But man, I think it really is going to come down mainly to taxes. And that's why I'm such a big fan of your work. And us actually getting to use the money, as much money as possible, actually getting to use it, right, in retirement. So David, somebody out there listening saying, hey, I want some of that. I love the idea. My person I'm talking to at ABC Brokerage isn't talking about tax strategy. They put me in this product or that product, and that was the extent of the strategy and the planning. We talked about some questions they could ask their team, but is there any other way to plug in if they say, I want specifically the kind of work and planning that David's talking about doing? Any advice there?
Well, I mean, if they want to adopt what I call a power of zero approach to retirement planning, they've got to find someone who's been down that road before, that's a seasoned hand, that isn't doing this for the first time. Because guess what? If the numbers show that you can spend an extra $2 million in retirement by accumulating the right amount of dollars in the right types of accounts, and the person who's helping you with this is the first time they've ever done it, and you're their guinea pig, what's the likelihood that they're going to get it right? So it's so important that you find someone who has been down this road before, that has helped people achieve these types of tax savings, that can do a before and after comparison, that can show you the math behind it. Math has got to, we love to attach a price tag to inaction. You don't have to get to the 0% tax bracket, but if you don't get to the 0% tax bracket, here's the cost if tax rates stay level, and here's the cost if tax rates double, and those numbers are never pretty.
Yeah. So, again, another step. So to learn more. So I think everybody listening needs to go to Amazon or unless you have another site you want them to go to, get the Power of Zero book, right? And the movie too. We can find that same kind of places.
Yeah. So the movie can be found on Amazon. It can be streamed on YouTube. It can be streamed on iTunes. Pretty much wherever you stream movies, you can watch the movie. I recommend you watch the movie. I recommend you read The Power of Zero. And just to let your listeners know, there's going to be a follow-up to The Power of Zero coming through Penguin Random House in February of 2021. So that's exciting. It's going to be the sequel to The Power of Zero. It's called Tax-Free Income for Life. So that'll be coming to bookstores near you about a year from now.
Excellent. Again, check out those books. I often tell listeners, participants that, hey, the government's never going to call you up and say, hey, you know what? If you did this, this, and this, you could get more money back, or you could get a better return here or there. It's really our responsibility to be proactive and take the steps. And this is the kind of stuff, educating yourself, reading these books, listening to this information. This is how we're going to best take care of ourselves, our family, and our retirement. And David, I just want to thank you for the work you're doing, for good data-backed mathematical information that's beyond that surface level of this is good, this is bad, maybe just to sell a point of view.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's what I do. I'm very passionate about it. I think that we've got 78 million Americans who are baby boomers, who are either retired or getting ready to retire. And my job, I feel like, is to raise the warning cry and to raise awareness about the future of tax rates and how you can best position yourself to wring every last bit of tax efficiency out of your retirement nest egg.
And now that you've been on the Retirement Resource, you are now an official authority on the Retirement Resource for our listeners. So anytime there's updates, the next book comes out, let me know and we'll make sure we get the good word out. And again, I thank you so much for being an expert guest on the Retirement Resource, David.
It was an honor and a pleasure. Thank you, Bo.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so I think that you can see that we touched on a wide range of issues, but all of which are really central to the Power of Zero paradigm. I think that interview really just packed a lot of punch and laid it all out there, and was a good return to the basics in terms of revisiting all of the reasons why we believe the way that we do and why we make recommendations in the way that we make them. Once again, if you are looking for someone to help you adopt these types of approaches in your retirement, head on over to davidmcknight.com. We'll hook you up with a qualified and vetted Power of Zero advisor. And if you are a financial advisor looking to adopt these types of principles in your practice, we'd love to chat with you over at powerofzero.com. Thank you so much for being part of the podcast today, and we will look forward to chatting with you same time next week.